Everybody, I'm meteorologist Greg D here, live from home just before I go to bed. Figured it's time to do one last update here. A lot of things have come out since the 5 p.m. advisory on Idalia, so we're going to go quickly through some of the information. I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible, and then there will be more updates, obviously, tomorrow morning as I get into work. Remember, I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go in, so lots to prepare tomorrow. I'll probably go in a little earlier tomorrow just to get some graphics ready, as there's going to be a lot of talk about the storm tomorrow. So let me show you what's going on here. We're going to go to the satellite picture of the storm first before I lose daylight here, and what you're seeing here is a big flare-up of thunderstorms right in the middle of this storm. This really has been quite a flare-up as the sun sets over the storm. The center is right in the middle of the screen where you see all that bubbling cloud cover. So it is now intensifying. I think it's getting better organized. There is a lot of structure here. Still doing a little loop, so we don't really know where it's going to come out of that loop. But let me tell you this, I'm going to be watching it closely. If it crosses over the western part of Cuba, it's going to take a more eastern track probably. If it goes closer to Cozumel and Cancun, then it's going to track a little farther to the west. So where that center passes tomorrow morning is really going to help us, I think, try to narrow down where this thing is going to go for tomorrow afternoon. And that's because as it passes the latitude there, the position of western Cuba, it'll start to accelerate. And accelerating hurricanes are not going to make huge swings in their track. Once this thing starts booking it north and northeast, starts to feel the impact of what's happening to its north, it should be locked in on that track. So I'm going to be watching that very, very carefully as we go through the next several hours, and especially tomorrow morning. Remember, we're live tomorrow. You can get updates 4:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then if conditions warrant, we're going to be with you even earlier on Tuesday evening, and may stay on continuously depending on how things go. All right, so let me show you the current information out there on this storm. So this is the 5 p.m. update. There's going to be another update coming up here shortly, but it's not going to update the track. The track is going to be updated at 11. You'll see Jason's going to post that on my Facebook page. He's in tonight when that comes in. So a couple of changes here. Since earlier, they now have it tracking pretty close to the western tip of Cuba. It is a little farther east. Notice the track there. So that's why maybe, the Hurricane Center is kind of favoring a little closer track to us. We'll have to watch that carefully. This does not mean a trend. Remember, we're not really going to know until it starts moving, and that's not really going to happen during the day tomorrow. But they've got it becoming a hurricane by late tomorrow night or early Tuesday morning. And then the update here really is that they've increased the intensity to a Category 2 100-mile-an-hour storm somewhere west of the Nature Coast, 2 a.m. on Wednesday. So the timing really hasn't changed in its position. They've got the center crossing somewhere across the Big Bend. This is a big wildlife area. There is, thank goodness, as you see here, this is a forest systems conservation easement, so you don't really get to a lot of places here until you get to Cross City in Chiefland. Cedar Key being the one place here at the bottom of the screen. They got hit hard by Hermine back in 2016, and if it goes just to the north of Cedar Key, then they would get hit hard by this storm too. Cone is still really wide, obviously, but I need to remind you, I'm going to do this every update, it's not just the cone. Look at this. There's the cone in the gray, and look at where the watches and warnings are. In the pink here, that is a hurricane watch, and that extends from outside of the cone, from basically the Sarasota-Charlotte County line all the way up out of the cone, basically to Apalachicola along the coast. A hurricane watch means that, number one, hurricane conditions are possible in parts of the watch area within the next 48 hours. That does not mean that everyone in the watch area will see hurricane conditions. Hurricane watches are always issued for a wider area than will actually see hurricane conditions. One of the reasons why the Hurricane Center has issued hurricane watches is because the track is not completely set yet. We've been talking about this all day. It's doing a loop. So they're not really sure where it's going to come out of this loop. So they're going to give us a little bit of an extra area. Plus, a hurricane watch is an automatic tropical storm warning, which they were going to issue for that size anyway because tropical storm force winds in this storm may extend more than 200 miles away from the storm. Of more importance with this system is the surge watch. And again, notice where the surge watch is. It extends all the way up from Apalachicola all the way down to south of Naples. This happened with Ian before. People were focusing on the cone, thinking that the impacts are only in the cone. They are not. As Idalia approaches the coast, the cone will get smaller because we'll be more sure about the area that the center will pass through. But the impacts will still cover the same large area and extend well beyond the cone. So don't focus on the cone. It's not where the impacts will be. And yeah, there could still be a surge all the way down to Fort Myers. In fact, let me show you the latest data here. This is the latest surge forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Notice, all the way down to the Keys, they expect 1 to 2 feet of ocean rise. From Chokoloskee, hope I'm saying that right, basically Everglades City, all the way north through Naples, Cape Coral, Port Charlotte, Sarasota County, Bradenton, all of Tampa Bay, up to the Anclote River. So about the Pasco-Hillsborough County line, they expect 3 to 5 feet of sea level rise, with 2 to 4 feet south of Charlotte Harbor. 3 to 5 feet is a pretty significant sea level rise. Now, these are worst case scenarios, but these are significant. Farther north from the Anclote River, along the Pasco and Hernando coast, 5 to 8 feet potentially of sea level rise. And then north of there, this is the more significant surge, 7 to 11 feet from the Wasilla River all the way down to the Hernando-Citrus County line, basically. That's where you could see 7 to 11 feet of storm surge rise. That would be significant. That number is at high tide, and that would mean that places like Crystal River would be significantly flooded by this storm if this track holds and the storm gains to the intensity that the Hurricane Center is predicting, which is a Category 2 at 100 miles an hour. The problem with this storm is its track. Storms that come in and go northeast through our area are the ones that we worry about the most. Any storm that goes east or northeast, and that's because this east movement gathers more water and pushes it harder at the coast. It's able to gather the Gulf and literally slosh it towards the east, towards our coast, and that tends to give you higher sea level rises versus a track that would go like this, where the water is pulled along the coast and you still get some water rise, but not nearly as much as if the Gulf is getting pushed right into the west coast of Florida. So there are going to be places that may see, if this forecast holds, a significant sea level rise. Now, because of the track of this storm, if you're watching down or if you know someone that's down in Fort Myers, Sarasota, okay, this is not Ian. The surge at Fort Myers Beach down to Bonita Springs is not going to be what we had with Ian, okay? I don't expect significant damage from a 2 to 4 foot surge there. Some of the beach area will be flooded, but you're not going to get the kind of damage that we saw in Ian. Now, for those north of Tampa Bay, this is going to be worse than Ian because Ian didn't impact areas very much north of there. Also on this track, I would say that for the I-4 corridor, Idalia has the potential of being more impactful than Ian was because Ian passed to the south. It went through Port Charlotte, basically on a track like this. So some of the worst conditions were along the center and to the east. Well, now you've got a storm that's going farther out in the Gulf of Mexico, and the worst conditions with this one are going to be along the center and to the east. Now, how far east they go, that's yet to be determined, right? But for some of you north of the bay, this is going to be worse than Ian just because you're going to be closer to the center of the storm. As far as tropical storm force winds and where those winds will be, let me show you that. Pull up my graphics here. So let's talk about where will the tropical storm force winds be. So everywhere in the blue here, between the blue and the yellow, you're looking at tropical storm force winds, potentially sustained closer to the coast in gusts in the interior. Let me change colors here so we kind of color code everything. So everyone between this yellow line and the blue line, that includes all of Citrus County, Hernando, Pasco, Polk, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Manatee, Sarasota, Hardee, DeSoto, and it really looks like most of Highlands County too. So our whole area basically is going to experience tropical storm force winds anywhere between 40 and 60 miles an hour. They would likely be sustained for a part of the storm along the coast, gusty in rain bands away from the beaches. Now, what is a 40 to 60 mile wind gust? That is not going to cause significant structural damage. This is basically a strong summer thunderstorm. You're talking about tree branches breaking. You've got an old branch hanging up in your oak, thing is going to bring it down. If it falls on power lines, we're going to get some power outages. That's to be expected. Sporadic. It's not going to be widespread. It'll be areas where their tree cover is more susceptible to wind damage. And I would suspect that in this case, it's going to be the northern half of our area, south of I-4. A lot of the trees have already been cleaned out by Ian. I think a lot of the weaker branches have probably fallen. North of I-4, we didn't get as much wind damage with Ian, so there may be more susceptibility to gusty winds north of I-4. That's just my guess, not something that the Hurricane Center is talking about. Now then, in the yellow, you see the yellow color there, the yellow line. Starting with that yellow line to the red line, those are areas that may see winds of 60 to 74 miles per hour. So that is close to our coast. Maybe the northwestern portion of Citrus County, you could get some stronger tropical storm force winds. And even if this becomes a hurricane, the area in the red area between the red lines, those are hurricane force winds. Notice all of these winds stay offshore. So even though we are under a hurricane watch, as of the current National Hurricane Center forecast, no one in our area is forecast to actually get hurricane conditions. And that's important. The hurricane watch there is just there as an option, just in case, because we're not sure on the track yet. But right now, if this storm stays on this track, we're not going to see hurricane conditions in our area, despite there being a hurricane watch. And that's really, really important to remember, okay? So for most of us, this is going to be a strong summer thunderstorm with, obviously, as you would see in any thunderstorm, some tree damage. Maybe a tree branch falls on your fence. Pool cages, always damaged by this, right? I'm sure some of you are thinking, man, I just replaced my screens after Ian, and here we go again. Yeah, you may have to, because a branch may fall on your screens. Maybe a tree branch will fall on your roof. Maybe there'll be some minor roof damage, that kind of deal. But these are things that could happen in any summer thunderstorm, so we're not really looking at a huge damaging, this is not going to be an Ian rolling through the area, okay? It's going to get windy. Speaking of which, when do the winds arrive? Let's talk about most likely arrival time. Let me take the wind forecast off. Most likely arrival time. It keeps shifting a little bit every time the Hurricane Center issues this. So basically, by 9 p.m. Tuesday, what this is saying, the tropical storm force winds will be north of Spring Hill. So everyone south of that black line will be experiencing tropical storm conditions by 9 p.m. on Tuesday, based on this forecast. 9 a.m., the winds will be still offshore. What does that tell me? That during the afternoon on Tuesday, the winds will build, and sometime probably between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m., according to this forecast, most of our area is going to start to get into tropical storm force winds, and those winds may be as strong as maybe 30, 40, 50 miles an hour in gusts in some places. So again, we're looking at mostly a tropical storm event for most of us. This does not look like it's going to be, a huge wind machine. Even if this becomes a Category 2 hurricane, most of those winds are going to be within 30 or 40 miles of the center. And if the center stays 50 miles offshore, well, that means most of the hurricane conditions will be offshore. The thing that is more concerning to me by far than the wind is the water. And that's because even if you're in a place where you're not getting hurricane force winds, which a lot of us are, you're going to get a rise in water. There's a high tide on Tuesday afternoon. There's another one on Wednesday. The one on Wednesday is the one that is more concerning because we're going to get more of an onshore flow on Wednesday. And I think that's the one that could potentially really start to increase the chances of the water running high. I'm going to see here, kind of on the fly. Everybody hold on. I'm doing this on the fly, so you know how that goes. I'm going to load up a couple of models here. And what I really want to show you is the winds. We'll do wind gusts, but this is going to show the direction and the flow of the winds to kind of help you gauge what I'm looking at here. I'm going to load the GFS and the Euro. You guys can actually see what is happening here while I load it. So there it is. So this is the GFS Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. It's got the storm making landfall kind of very close to where the hurricane center is. Now these models are going to wobble. The center is going to move back and forth. But the general idea here is if you remember 2 days ago, the Euro had this same exact position for the storm 2 days ago. So basically GFS is now caught up with the Euro. Let's see if we can pull up the Euro here. So this is the Euro, GFS and Euro. I mean, they're basically in the same location. You're splitting like 20 miles, 25 miles here. Heaviest rain is going to stay close to the center, but we're going to be on the wetter, stronger side of the storm. So it's going to be blustery. But even here Wednesday, some of you may not get into like a solid rain. Other than on the coast where there's going to be rain bands that are going to be producing a lot of heavy rain along the coast, those of you east of 75, it may not be an all-day rain event like you had with Ian. This may be squally weather, some showers or periods of rain moving through. There may be breaks of sun while it's windy. And remember, we talked about this earlier. It's in the wind that you're going to get the strongest wind gusts. So it'll rain, it'll get windy, you'll get some tree branches down, and then the rain stops, the wind stops, and the sun comes out. And then the wind relaxes because the rain is not pushing it down towards the ground. Here's what I'm looking at here in terms of the wind. So this is Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. The center, and this is really cool. I love this computer model. This is my favorite, one of my favorite views, because you can see the arrows show you the motion of the air around the storm near the surface. So even though we're getting a high tide here, notice what the wind is doing. It's not really pushing the water towards shore. The wind is kind of blowing it offshore north of Indian Rocks Beach, and then it's blowing along the coast. So Tuesday's high tide probably not going to be a huge issue. There'll be some rise because the storm will be approaching, but it probably is not going to be all that bad. If we're going to get, this is going to be really cool. So I'm going to take this. Let's take the GFS. It doesn't matter which one you use since they show the same position. Let's take the GFS now to Wednesday. Let's take it to 2 o'clock. That high tide at Gandy, I remember, was around 3. It's around noon on the Gulf Coast. And look at this. Look at the wind behind the storm. After it makes landfall, that's when the wind turns onshore. And that's when the water starts to get pushed into the bay. Now, the gusts here from the GFS, notice, they're 30 to 40 miles an hour. So Wednesday, the wind is in the right direction, but it's not as strong as it could be if the storm was a little farther south or closer to us. So the National Weather Service and the Hurricane Center surge forecast is the worst case scenario but we may not get to those numbers, especially if the winds are only sustained at 35 or 40, and most of the wind energy with the storm goes to our north. That's a very interesting forecast there from the GFS. Let me pull up the euro at the same time. So there's the euro. Okay, so here's the euro. Let me actually pull this map out. So here's the euro. This is going to be Wednesday morning. Zoom in on the Bay Area. And it's got gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour. The center has already made landfall, but it's got gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour Wednesday morning with an onshore flow. So definitely the first half of Wednesday into Wednesday afternoon, it's when we'll be watching those tides, and for a significant water rise if there is one. Trying to see if I can see any higher numbers from... No? The highest numbers I see from the euro in terms of gusts, 50 to 60 miles an hour. So again, strong summer thunderstorm. Yes, I know there's a hurricane watch, but that doesn't mean that most of the people in that hurricane watch area are going to get hurricane conditions. All right, so I don't think, if you saw the hurricane watches, if you got a little worried, I don't think you should be as worried as maybe those watches made you because of the storm. All right, I'm looking for some questions. If anyone has any questions, drop them in. What wind speed is a normal afternoon thunderstorm? A normal afternoon thunderstorm wind speed is 40 to 60 miles an hour. Get these all the time. So that's kind of where we're at with a normal thunderstorm, everybody. No more questions? All right, good. Just one little question. That's good. So that's kind of the latest here. Again, conditions tomorrow will be fine. There's rain chances in the afternoon, as you would typically expect. But on the current track, let me pull up that track and we'll talk about the timing. It's kind of what I want to leave you with here. On that current track from the hurricane center, we would not be getting into the worst conditions until Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday evening. And by far the worst of it would be overnight Tuesday into the first half of Wednesday. So haven't decided yet whether I'll be sleeping at the station. We'll kind of see where the track goes. 40 mile an hour winds, I'm 3 miles away, may not. You know how it is. I may sleep better at home if it tracks a little closer to us. May end up staying at the station instead. So that's kind of the latest here. There'll be more information. I think we'll get a better idea of what's happening during the day tomorrow as it really picks up speed heading north. I'm getting ready to head to bed. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I know tomorrow's going to be a long day as well. You guys should too. Get a lot of rest. I don't see this as being a major wind event for us. My level of concern is obviously not as high as it was with Ian. Ian was a much different storm. Ian was already a hurricane as it crossed Cuba into our warm waters, okay? So it was able to intensify quickly because it was already pretty strong. This is a minimal tropical storm right now. And even with rapid intensification, it's very unlikely that it would reach a category 4 or 5 in such a short span of time. It might be a 2, maybe it'll be close to a 3, but it's not going to blow up like Ian did off the coast. I think it's just going to run out of time. It's going to be moving too fast as it runs over the warm Gulf waters. So I'm not that worried about it. I think for most of us, this is going to be a windy, rainy day and night, Tuesday night into Wednesday. Rainfall shouldn't be a big issue either. I don't think there'll be enough there to really cause major issues. So that's kind of the latest here. Thanks so much for joining me for all my updates. I'll do a little Reader's Digest version of this on Instagram after this in my Reels. If you haven't followed me there, it's @GregDWeather. Make sure you're following me on Instagram. I put 90-second updates there throughout the day if you don't want to watch these longer updates, which, of course, do take a little bit of time. Anyway, you'll hear a lot from me tomorrow morning, 4:30 to 10 a.m. on Good Morning Tampa Bay, and, of course, social media throughout the day, 24/7. The whole ABC Action News team has you covered as we continue to track Idalia. Take care, everybody.